Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service, and we try to do this each evening on behalf of a unique partnership with Alaska Public Media. It is Sunday, October 9th, 2022. And a quick check of what's going on across the country. If you'd like to learn more information on top of what I provide in this broadcast, you can go to weather.gov, the National Weather Service's online presence. It'll bring you to a map of the continental U.S. with Alaska and Hawaii in the lower left. And you can point and click anywhere on this map and get a forecast with any relevant watches, warnings, or advisories that are in effect for anywhere in the country. Quick check of the map this afternoon. Frost advisories down across areas of the central Appalachians and areas of the Northeast. Flood watches out in West Texas. Some air quality alerts around Seattle down toward, looks like Portland. And then here in Alaska, we're still watching some snow, mainly on the light side, falling there across the east central interior from areas of the Brooks Range down to the Alaska Range. And the snows will continue through tonight. So far, as of this Sunday morning, a couple inches of snow fell around Minchumina, as well as Bettles and Adigan Pass. And we expect accumulations of 2 to 4 inches to be somewhat common, especially in elevations between 2 and 3,000 feet. And areas around some of the mountains and Hanslift could produce locally 6 inches or more of snow, especially above 3,000 feet. We're also expecting stronger winds across the eastern Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula later tonight and into the day on Monday as low pressure tracks up through the lower Bering toward Bristol Bay and then crosses the Alaska Peninsula. But the system is not looking quite as strong as it was yesterday at this time, so the advisories and warnings that were associated with that have been relaxed, but nevertheless some strong gusty winds, perhaps up to 50-60 miles an hour as that system works its way east on Monday. And then as we go through midweek, Tuesday through Thursday, there is the potential for some elevated surf along the northwest coast between Cape Lisburne and Utqiagvik, maybe surf running 1 to 3 feet above normal levels. And then finally, for the mid and latter part of this upcoming week, heavy rain is possible again along areas of the northeastern Gulf Coast into the northern Panhandle, with that rain arriving, especially the heavier rain, later Wednesday night into the day on Thursday. Quick check of some of the FAA webcams across the region. Utqiagvik enjoying mostly clear skies, temperature hovering this Sunday afternoon right around the freezing mark. Arctic Village has seen some snow, light snow and fog, temperature sitting at 32 degrees, so it's a rather wet snow, certainly there in Arctic Village. Through tonight, you can see snowfall totals of maybe 3-4 inches total from this particular system. Cold Bay is going to see the winds pick up on Monday. Right now just cloudy and 46 with relatively light winds, but that low pressure system will be passing across the Alaska Peninsula and could produce some wind gusts as high as 50-60 miles an hour, especially during the day Monday into early Monday evening. Yakutat looking at some lighter rain showers now, 46 degrees, but some heavier rains could return to the northeastern Gulf Coast and northern Panhandle, especially later on Wednesday and into the day on Thursday. Quick check of any hazardous weather. No advisories, no watches, no warnings, but these areas highlighted in a lighter grayish blue are for special weather statements. We have that potential yet for another 1, 2, 3 inches of snow possible through tonight there across areas of the east central interior on top of what's already fallen. And then as we go from the period Tuesday through Thursday, from around Cape Lisburne north up through Utqiagvik on the northwest coast, we could see some elevated surf, maybe running 1 to 3 feet above normal. Nothing as rough as what we saw with the more recent Chukchi Sea storm late last week. And then finally, southern areas of the state, we expect that low crossing the lower Bering and the Alaska Peninsula on Monday could bring some stronger winds there to the eastern Aleutians, including Dutch Harbor on up through Cold Bay. Some wind gusts perhaps as high as 60 miles an hour, not quite as strong as what we were thinking at this time yesterday. And then in the northern Panhandle and northeastern Gulf, that's the area that could see the heavier rainfall as we have another atmospheric river taking aim on that location. for later Wednesday and especially during the day on Thursday. Quick check of satellite imagery. We can see the low pressure is lifting up into the southeast interior, into the Yukon. Curl in the clouds. We have one frontal band pushing inland there across the panhandle, bringing with it some moderate to heavier rainfall today and breezy conditions. And then out to the west, we see the next wave in the clouds there out across the central Aleutians, lower Bering Sea. That is the next wave of low pressure that's going to work its way eastward across the lower portion of the Bering Sea, just north of the Aleutian chain, and then that'll cut across the Alaska Peninsula as we go into Monday afternoon and Monday night. Meanwhile, further north, we see cloud cover associated with the snow falling in through the mountains from the Alaska Range up north there through the Brooks Range, and again, some additional snowfall. Maybe another additional 1 to 3 inches possible here through tonight in some areas, especially above 2,000 and 3,000 feet. And here's the weather map looking at the one low that's sitting there near Prince William Sound, another one that's come into the interior, the Yukon territory, with snow on the backside and the colder air and some moderate to locally heavier rain along that frontal band that's working its way in through the panhandle. Back to the west, there's the low just north of the central Aleutians. That will continue to track eastward later tonight into early Monday morning, though this system is not quite as strong as what it was looking like here late last week or on Saturday. So that's some good news there. And then as we go into the day Monday afternoon, the low cuts across the northern portion there of the Alaska Peninsula to near Shelikof Strait, with the frontal system extending eastward. And then it weakens on Tuesday, and then we get the hint of the next system down there that's going to come out of the North Pacific up into the Gulf. That's going to bring the heavy rain to areas of the Gulf Coast and Panhandle Wednesday night into Thursday. And we see breezier conditions developing with a trough there along the northwest coast starting there Tuesday afternoon, which will cause that elevated surf. So we have low temperatures generally in the 40s across the Panhandle, but 30s, some areas below freezing into the 20s around the Alaska Range, Copper River Basin Monday morning. Highs still 50s there in through the Panhandle, but cooler only in the lower 40s, say Anchorage Bowl, staying generally in the 30s there just south of the Alaska Range, though 55 at Kodiak. And low temperatures Tuesday morning, a bit cooler in the Panhandle, lower to maybe mid-40s, but temperatures getting down to near freezing at Anchorage and certainly below freezing there across the southern interior, where readings stay above freezing along the coast. And Tuesday afternoon temperatures 50s, even near 60 there far southern Panhandle, but otherwise cooler 40s, many areas there across the south central. And then the northern parts of the state, generally below freezing here. North of the Alaska Range, we anticipate lows, some teens, especially there along the Brooks Range, otherwise 20s rather common. High temperatures on Monday afternoon flirt with freezing there along the northwest coast, Seward Peninsula. A little above freezing through the Yukon Valley, but below freezing there across the Brooks Range. And then temperatures getting down into the single digits there along the Brooks Range Tuesday morning, with high temperatures back up around or a bit above freezing along the west coast and up through the Yukon Valley. Across the interior southwest, we could see some lows getting below freezing now through the lower Yukon and Kuskokwim valleys. Otherwise, temperatures lower mid-40s along the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutians. Warmest temperatures Monday ahead of that frontal system in the 50s along the Alaska Peninsula on up toward Kodiak. And then Tuesday morning, we'll see lows getting back down around or below freezing there in the southwest interior, but generally remaining in the upper 30s to lower 40s out the Alaska Peninsula and in through the Aleutians, with temperatures a bit cooler, generally 30s and 40s above freezing on Tuesday across the region. Temperatures are expected to average above normal mid-month and beyond October 15th through the 19th, especially over the southeast part of the state in through the Panhandle, and precipitation will average above normal, especially the eastern two-thirds of the mainland. And coming up now is meteorologist Grant Smith with an outlook for the week ahead for the Panhandle.
Hello everyone, meteorologist Grant Smith with the National Weather Service here in Juneau, Alaska. This is being recorded on a Sunday afternoon, October 9th, and we're going to do a 5-day outlook over the next week for those of you in southeast Alaska. Now, so far today has been a rainy and windy day, but going forward it's looking like the rainy pattern will continue. In fact, going into the second half of the week, moderate to heavy rain is expected, and that could cause some rivers to rise going into Wednesday night into Thursday and Friday. Now, the precise place, timing, and location of the heaviest precipitation is still vague over southeast Alaska, but ensembles and model solutions are hinting at this being a significant rain event once again for the second half of this upcoming week. So your 5-day outlook, Monday and Tuesday, very minor impacts from the weather. Monday, a slight break in the weather systems, but still some on and off rainy, showery type weather for the north, drier conditions in the south. Tuesday, a quick moving low pressure system will bring another round to southeast Alaska on Tuesday. That's going to be pretty quick, very minor impacts. But Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, that's when we could see some minor impacts from the rain, including some wind, and then those river rises expected. This is late Wednesday into Thursday, and then Friday and into the weekend, the rainy weather continues, and that could last also into the weekend as well. That's a completely separate system that we're going to need to keep a close eye on as we go throughout the week. And thanks for watching. I've been Meteorologist Grant Smith with the National Weather Service here in Juneau, Alaska.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Let's take a look now at your aviation weather. If you have a flight planned either on Monday or Tuesday, the main weather feature we will be watching is low pressure that will be pushing across Bristol Bay, the northern portion of the Alaska Peninsula, and then eventually be located in the northwestern Gulf on the east side of the Kenai by Tuesday morning. This feature will have widespread IFR associated with it across the southwest, down there through the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, along with some stronger gale to even lower end storm force winds. The low is tracking a little further south and not quite as intense as what it was looking like it would be on Saturday. Nevertheless, it will have impacts. We have IFR conditions there, the eastern portion of the Brooks Range up in the northeastern part of the state. Snow that fell over the weekend is pushing east into Canada. And along the Gulf Coast, back in through areas of the southwest, Lake Iliamna, down toward Bristol Bay, IFR conditions Monday afternoon will continue, along with windier conditions there as well. MVFR along and south, especially of the Brooks Range to about the Yukon River. Tuesday morning, we could see pockets of IFR in the interior, Yukon Flats, as well as down through, say, the Talkeetna Mountains into the north end of Cook Inlet, and then across the northern Gulf Coast and much of the Panhandle. Also some IFR conditions showing up there along the northwestern Arctic coast, along the Chukchi Sea, and that may expand a bit Tuesday afternoon. They are in the northwest, and we expect some IFR conditions along the central and eastern Alaska Range on up into the 40-mile Gold Country in the upper Tanana Valley, with widespread MVFR conditions along the west coast, especially Seward Peninsula southward, and the northern Gulf Coast into the Panhandle. Anatuvik Pass should generally see MVFR conditions on Monday. Adigan Pass, IFR in the morning giving way to MVFR conditions. Further south and west, IFR holding there at Lake Clark with that system passing into the western Gulf. MVFR further north at Merrill Pass. And Rainy Pass as well as Windy Pass may manage to hold on to VFR conditions during the day on Monday. As we go further east, Isabel Pass may see VFR give way to MVFR conditions by afternoon, and Mentasta Pass should generally see MVFR conditions during the day on Monday. Further south and west, Tanita Pass, look for VFR early, giving way to MVFR conditions. And then heading on down to Portage Pass, as that moisture pulls in from the Gulf, we expect VFR conditions in the morning, becoming IFR east entrance over Prince William Sound, and look for MVFR conditions developing there along the west entrance as we go through Monday afternoon. Chilcoot and White should generally have MVFR conditions during the day on Monday. And we can see freezing levels have come down across much of the mainland. They're generally below 2,000 feet aloft, with the surface freezing line running down into areas of the southwest interior along the Alaska Range. We still have freezing levels, though, upwards to 4,000 to 6,000 feet, the southern third of the Panhandle, as much as 8,000 to 10,000 feet Haida Gwaii, and 4,000 feet back toward the central Aleutians. Icing is possible with that low that's going to be pressing eastward on Monday across the Alaska Peninsula above 5,000 feet back toward Bristol Bay, and southeast of Kodiak Island above 10,000 feet. For the interior, we could see isolated icing generally above 5,000 feet. More impressively, looking at the upper level jet stream winds at 30,000 feet, we have 165 knot west-southwest wind max associated with this jet core is anticyclonically curved because we have a ridge of high pressure that it's kind of rounding, and that cuts right across the Alaska Peninsula through the Kenai Peninsula into the southeast interior, bringing it down to 700 millibars, a core of winds of 55 to 75 knots there, especially over the western Gulf from the southwest. And then as we bring it down further to 3,000 feet, we see the low circulation there near the lower end of Cook Inlet, and circulation around it, we're looking for west to northwest winds, 45 to 55 knots from the Alaska Peninsula out over a good portion of the southwestern and central Gulf. And what this will translate to is that sort of wind field. We do anticipate there could be some severe turbulence along and especially the Pacific side there of the Alaska Peninsula, and then just south and east of Kodiak Island into the southwestern portion of the Gulf on Monday. The turbulence generally surfaced to 4,000 feet there. Other areas along the Gulf coast there surfaced to 6,000 feet, and then area of the interior, Upper Tanana Valley, Central Alaska Range surfaced to 8,000 feet. That wraps up your flight weather. If you are able to get off the ground, have a safe flight.
Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with the National Weather Service with another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining me today are not just one, but two people, both with the last name Stevens, which is even more fun, but no relation. We have Eric Stevens from Gina and George Stevens, who is a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Awesome. And today you guys brought a really cool toy, or I should say tool, with you. It's a sandbox, but why are you guys working on a sandbox?
Well, it's part of our senior design project, and we were approached by AKwx to build this for them. They had a proof of concept that they developed about a year ago, I think, and they wanted a more robust version that they could pack onto a plane and take places, and it's a handy learning tool for kids and adults.
So you're a mechanical engineering student. You've built a traveling sandbox for the experimental program to stimulate competitive research, EPSCoR, and Gina's facilitated this. But why do we need a traveling sandbox?
Well, the prototype was such a big hit that they decided they wanted another one, actually two, that that would be easier to travel with, possibly marketable even.
Okay, so this is a traveling sandbox that's got a lot of bits and pieces and a computer hooked up to it. What is the computer doing with the sand?
The computer actually uses a Kinect sensor to read the topography of the sand or the shape of the sand, and then the computer translates that into information which it projects using a projector onto the sand, showing topographical lines and which is representative of the shape of the sand.
Okay, so this is a live mapping tool?
Yeah. It's interactive. As you're moving your hands through it, it is actively following and changing the lines to fit what you're doing.
That sounds like something I could have in my backyard.
Yep.
It'd be a lot of fun. So you guys had to change the design a little bit to make this more Alaska-fied, right?
Yeah.
Okay, how'd you do that?
Well, the original was made out of basically lumber and Simpson strong tie type stuff, and we rebuilt it to make it lighter and basically more transportable. We can pack it down to a fairly small size, and it can be loaded onto a plane and flown anywhere in the state. Which
you guys did today. And you have plans to take this in other places of Alaska, right?
Yep, we're actually going to be headed down to Homer with it later today.
Okay, very good. Eric, how does this fit into science learning around Alaska?
Well, you know what? I think it is a tool and it is a toy. And it brings out a smile from an 8-year-old and the smile from a 48-year-old with that inner 8-year-old wanting to get out. The sandbox, it's an interactive learning tool that teaches us how topography in the 3 dimensions is related to, say, a 2-dimensional map. More about that later. Just like George was saying, it's got a Kinect sensor, not just for video games anymore. It can sense out the lay of the land there, feeds that information in the computer identifies that, sends a signal to a projector to send topographic lines to map over that lumpy ground. So you get a 3-dimensional topo map out of it. And my favorite thing about it, this is the thing that stops people at the trade show, they stop at your booth and don't leave, is that you run your hand through that sandbox and it responds in real time. It remaps the topography as you get to be Mr. Tectonic Plate Drifter there. You can make things how you want. Well, what if we made a really high mountain here and a low valley there, and the lines adjust to what you did? It's a learning tool because it shows you that connection between these two-dimensional topo lines and what's really out in Alaska. And Alaska's a place with all kinds of topography. You know, we're from the Great Plains, where topo maps tend to be just like blank pieces of paper, but Alaska is particularly gifted in this regard, and this tool helps us, I think, learn more about our state, really.
Absolutely. And so this is going to enhance STEM learning, the science, technology, engineering, and math, in many different locations around Alaska. Then this would be something that kids and teachers can get their hands on.
It sure is. And I mentioned the it's like flypaper at a booth that, or at the Science Potpourri when we had Greg's original version of this sandbox, and that one was made out of scraps of wood, and it was a prototype. But even that one, before it had some of the refinements that George and crew have made for this newer, upscaled, maybe a 2.0 version of the sandbox, even that one was so attractive to people. It just demonstrated that this has potential to be a learning tool, an outreach tool, an education tool that now is portable and can go places in Alaska. Of course, there's only one sandbox, can't be everywhere at once, but hopefully it gets out there, gets the word out about EPSCoR and what science is being done here for Alaskans.
All right, that sounds really interesting, and I can't wait to get my hands in the sand and try this out for myself. We're going to demonstrate this here in our next segment of Alaska Weather Facts, but before we go, we want to remind you that EPSCoR, which is a new acronym for me now, but I'm going to remember this because you can follow them on Facebook and Twitter, and I invite you to do that. Alaska EPSCoR is also something that facilitates science learning at the University of Alaska around the state, and that stands for Experimental Program to Stimulate Competitive Research. So check that out, and make sure you tune in tomorrow because we're going to have the next version where we actually get our hands in the sand and check out how this works and demonstrates that topography. So for now, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and we'll see you again next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and we'll conclude our show with the marine segment. Before we do that, let's look at the sea ice edge, and we do have some redevelopment of some of the ice there along the northern shoreline of the Arctic coast, and that process will continue, though we are anticipating some breezier conditions along the northwest coast, especially between Cape Lisburne and Utqiagvik as we go through Tuesday into Thursday. Elevated surf will be possible, and we could see water levels running 1 to maybe as much as 3 feet above normal. Otherwise, in the southeast panhandle, Monday's marine forecast, inner channels, south winds 20 to 25 knots, Petersburg up through Lynn Canal, waves around 4 feet. Northwest winds 15 knots down through Ketchikan, Metlakatla, waves 6 feet. And for the outer coast of the Gulf, west winds 25 to 30 knots, waves running anywhere from 16 to near 20 feet. On Tuesday, inner channels, look for generally southeast to south winds, 25 knots or so at Petersburg north through Lynn Canal with gust up to 40 knots around Petersburg, waves running 5 feet. Little less so, 3 feet down toward Ketchikan and Metlakatla. And then for the outer coast, westerly winds there off the Gulf at 25 knots and waves generally running 12 to 14 feet. For the northwestern Gulf, winds across Cook Inlet will be out of the east-northeast, upwards to 20 knots, especially from Anchor Point south through the entrance, with waves of 8 to 10 feet. Off the Kenai, southwest winds 25 to 30 knots, waves 10 to 12 feet. And Prince William Sound, northwest winds 15 knots, waves 3 feet. Tuesday, look for northwesterly winds to hold up there at the entrance of Cook Inlet and off the Kenai to 35-knot gales with waves of 11 to as high as 15 feet south of Seward in the open waters of the Gulf. And then westerly winds at 15 knots and waves 2 feet in Prince William Sound. On Monday, we have low pressure working its way across the northern part of the Alaska Peninsula, Shelikof Strait. And south of there, winds will be out of the southwest to west, 40 to 45 knot gales on the North Pacific side with waves of 16 to 20 feet. On the Bering side, southeast winds 25 knots, Bristol Bay, 7-foot waves, but southwest storm force winds up to 50 knots there north of Cold Bay with waves running as high as 18 feet. And for Tuesday, look for winds and waves to come down. Winds generally out of the northwest at around 20 to 25 knots, waves 8 to 14 feet on the North Pacific and Western Gulf side, and 5 to 7 feet on the Bering side. And across the Aleutian chain, earlier on Monday, we expect winds to be out of the northwest, 40 to as high as 50 knot storm force winds around Dutch Harbor in the open waters there north, in the north side there in the Bering. Trailing off to northwest to west winds 25 to 30 knots through the central and western Aleutians, and waves generally running around 10 to 12 feet either side, central and western Aleutians. And then on Tuesday, look for winds to be west-northwest 15 to 20 knots, eastern Aleutians, waves running around 6 feet. Westerly winds through the central Aleutians, 25 to 30 knots, 7 to 8 foot waves, and then look for south-southwest gales to 40 knots with waves building to 14 feet west of Adak through Kiska to Shemya. And then along the southwest coast, winds will be northwesterly at 15 knots, Norton Sound, south of St. Lawrence Island with waves of 3 to 4 feet. Stronger winds south of Nunavik Island and off the Bristol Bay coast and Kuskokwim Bay, as well as east of St. Paul and St. George, 30 to 35 knot north-northwest winds, waves 9 to 10 feet. And then across much of the region, look for generally westerly winds 15 to 20 knots on Tuesday. Waves 4 feet or so in Norton Sound, around 5 to 6 feet, especially areas from the north side of Nunavik Island down through St. Paul, St. Matthew, and St. George. And then along the Arctic coast, winds will be out of the west-southwest 15 to 20 knots on Monday, waves 5 to 6 feet. Little higher waves, 7 to 8 feet along the northwest coast, Cape Lisburn up to Utqiagvik, southwest winds 20 knots, and westerly winds, west-northwest winds 15 to 20 knots through the Bering Strait with waves of 4 to 5 feet. And on Tuesday, the trough coming in from the upper Chukchi Sea, Arctic Ocean, is going to cause southwest winds to increase along the northwest coast there to 25 knots with waves of 8 to 11 feet, causing that elevated surf there. The Arctic coast east of Utqiagvik through Katovik, southwest to west winds 20 knots, waves 6 feet, and then down through the Bering Strait, look for winds 15 knots from the west with waves running 5 to 6 feet.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.